The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation buzzed with panic. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in their floating seats, their voices mixing into a wall of fear and desperation. At the center of it all stood Kethvar, his blue skin pale, with worry. His people, the Alterians, were known for their calm nature. Today, that calm was gone. 3 more worlds have gone silent, Kethvar announced to the assembly. His voice shook despite his best efforts. The Zorathi have wiped out everything living on Kepler 186, Tau Ceti, and Wolf 359. Billions of beings are dead. A collective gasp rose from the assembled delegates. The reptilian Zorathi had been a problem for months, but this was worse than anyone had imagined. They didn't just conquer worlds. They destroyed all life on them using weapons that turned living tissue into gray dust. Commander Vorthak of the Centaurian Defense Force stood up, his 4 arms gesturing helplessly. Our fleets cannot stop them. Every time we engage, they slaughter our forces. They fight like nothing we have ever seen. The truth was hard to admit. The Federation had built a civilization based on peace and cooperation. Their military existed, mainly to keep order and help with disasters. None of their species had evolved as predators. They were builders, thinkers, and diplomats. The concept of total war was foreign to them. "What about the Andromedan battle cruisers?" asked Delegate Yixtar, her insect-like features twitching with nervousness. "Destroyed," Vorthak replied grimly. "All 12 ships. The Zorathi don't just defeat us. They hunt us down and kill every survivor. They take no prisoners, they show no mercy." Kethvar pulled up a holographic display showing the affected systems. Red dots marked dead worlds. Yellow dots showed systems under attack. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Zorathi were moving toward the Federation's core worlds in a systematic campaign of genocide. "We need to face facts," Kethvar said. "Our way of fighting isn't working. The Zorathi evolved on a death world where only the strongest survived. They understand warfare in ways we don't. We need help from someone who thinks like they do." The hall fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant, but no one wanted to say it out loud. "You're talking about the humans," whispered Delegate Marthon from the back of the hall. The word humans sent a ripple of unease through the assembly. Earth had been discovered only recently. The planet's inhabitants hadn't even developed faster than light travel yet. But the initial surveys had revealed something disturbing about them. Humans were apex predators. Unlike every other sapient species in the Federation, humans had evolved from creatures that hunted and killed other animals for food. Their entire history was marked by constant warfare between different groups of their own kind. Their art, literature, and culture were filled with themes of conflict and violence. "They're barbaric," muttered someone from the crowd. "They're killers," added another voice. Kethvar nodded sadly. "Yes, they are. And that might be exactly what we need." He activated another holographic display, this one showing human military footage that Federation scouts had secretly recorded. The images were disturbing. Humans in combat moved with a fluid grace that spoke of millions of years of predatory evolution. They showed no hesitation about using lethal force. They seemed to actually enjoy the challenge of combat. "Look at their tactics," Kethvar pointed out. "They don't just defend. They attack. They hunt their enemies. They plan not just to win battles, but to completely destroy their opponent's ability to fight back." The footage showed human soldiers in what they called war games. Even in training, they moved like predators stalking prey. Their weapons were designed not to disable, but to kill. Their strategies focused on finding enemy weaknesses and exploiting them without mercy. "This is madness," protested Delegate Quilvin. "We're talking about asking barbarians to help us. What's to stop them from turning on us once they're done with the Zorathi?" "Nothing," Kethvar admitted. "But if we don't ask for their help, there won't be a Federation left to worry about." The debate that followed was heated but brief. The facts were simple and terrifying. The Zorathi had superior weapons, superior numbers, and superior fighting instincts. The Federation's peaceful nature was a fatal weakness against an enemy that existed only to destroy. In the end, the vote was unanimous. They would contact Earth. The message was sent through quantum relay to Earth's solar system. It took 3 days to reach the small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. When it arrived, it was picked up by monitoring stations around Earth and immediately forwarded to the International Space Defense Command in Colorado Springs. Captain Jake Morrison was on duty when the signal came in. He was a career military officer, a veteran of 3 different conflicts on Earth. His scarred hands moved efficiently over the control panels as he isolated the alien transmission. Admiral Kane to the communications center, emergency priority, he announced over the base intercom. Admiral Lisa Kane arrived within minutes. She was a small woman with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much combat. She listened without expression as the alien message played on the main screen. The hologram of Kethvar appeared, his blue features tight with desperation. "People of Earth," he began, "we are the Galactic Federation. We know your world exists, though we have not made contact before this moment. We come to you now because we need your help." The message went on to explain the situation: the Zorathi genocide, the failed Federation military response, the systematic destruction of entire star systems. As the hologram spoke, it showed images of burning worlds and fleeing refugee ships. "We have studied your species," Kethvar continued. "We know that you are different from us. Your people have experience with warfare that we lack. You understand concepts that we cannot grasp. We are asking you to share that knowledge with us. Help us stop the Zorathi before they destroy everything." When the message ended, the communications center was silent. Admiral Kane stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned to Morrison. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," she said quietly. "And activate the emergency response protocol. We're going to need volunteers." Within hours, the news had spread through Earth's military command structure. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Soldiers from every branch of service stepped forward. These weren't peacekeepers or humanitarian workers. These were warriors who understood that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to meet it with superior violence. The selection process began immediately. They needed humanity's best killers for a war that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. The 3 human ships cut through space like knives through silk. The UES Vengeance, UES Retribution, and UES Judgment were not built for exploration or diplomacy. They were weapons of war, hastily modified with alien technology to make the journey to Federation space. Commander Rick Adams stood on the bridge of the Vengeance studying star charts that showed systems he had never imagined. 2 weeks had passed since they left Earth's solar system. 2 weeks of preparation, planning, and learning about an enemy unlike anything humans had ever faced. "Sir, we're approaching Federation space," reported Lieutenant Karen White from the navigation station. "The aliens are sending us docking coordinates." Adams nodded. Around him, his team prepared for their first meeting with alien military commanders. These were not diplomats or scientists. They were soldiers chosen specifically for their ability to kill efficiently. Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, Army Rangers, and Air Force Special Operations personnel. Each one had seen combat. Each one had blood on their hands. Major Tony Blake stood near the weapons console, reviewing flight data from Federation fighters. The alien ships were fast and well-armed, but their tactics were predictable. They focused on defensive formations and minimal engagement protocols. Blake shook his head in disbelief. "They're fighting like they're afraid to hurt someone," he muttered to Sergeant Danny Murphy, who was cleaning his rifle nearby. Murphy looked up from his weapon. "That's because they are afraid. These aliens never learned how to hate their enemies. They think war is some kind of game with rules." Colonel Betty Ross entered the bridge carrying a datapad filled with intelligence reports. She had spent the entire trip studying Zorathi battle footage provided by the Federation. What she saw disturbed her, but not in the way it disturbed the aliens. "The Zorathi aren't better fighters than us," she announced to the assembled officers. "They're just more willing to be brutal than the Federation forces. But compared to human standards, they're amateurs." Adams turned to face his officers. "Remember why we're here. These aliens asked for help because their people are being wiped out. They're not warriors, but they're not evil either. They just don't understand that sometimes you have to become a monster to stop monsters." The docking process took several hours. Federation technology was advanced but overly complicated. Everything had multiple safety protocols and backup systems. The humans found it frustrating. In combat, complexity meant failure. When they finally boarded the Federation command station, the culture shock was immediate. The corridors were wide and well lit, decorated with art and plants. Everything was designed for comfort and beauty. It looked more like a luxury resort than a military base. General Vorthak met them at the airlock. The four-armed Centaurian was tall and dignified with ceremonial ribbons covering his uniform. He greeted the humans with formal courtesy, as if they were visiting dignitaries rather than soldiers coming to fight a war. "Welcome to Starbase Alpha," Vorthak said in accented English. "We are honored by your presence and grateful for your assistance." Adams looked around at the pristine corridors and peaceful atmosphere. "Where are your weapons? Where are your defenses?" Vorthak seemed confused by the question. "Our weapons are stored in secure areas as required by Federation safety protocols. Our defenses are managed by automated systems that activate only when necessary." Captain Susan Davis, the team's intelligence officer, stepped forward. "General, we need to understand your current tactical situation. Where are your war rooms? Your command centers? Your strategic planning facilities?" "We conduct our operations from the Harmony Chamber," Vorthak replied. "It is designed to promote peaceful resolution of conflicts through dialogue and compromise." The humans exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand why the Federation was losing so badly. The meeting in the Harmony Chamber was even more revealing. The room was circular, with soft lighting and comfortable seats arranged to encourage discussion. Charts and displays showed Federation fleet positions, but they were color-coded to minimize the visual impact of military operations. Ambassador Kethvar was present, along with representatives from a dozen different species. They all looked hopeful when the humans entered, as if the mere presence of Earth's warriors would solve their problems. "We have prepared detailed briefings on Zarathi capabilities," Kethvar began. "We believe that with proper defensive coordination, we can limit their expansion and negotiate a ceasefire." Adams interrupted him. "We're not here to negotiate, we're here to end this war." The alien delegates looked uncomfortable. "End it how?" asked one of them. "By destroying the Zarathi military completely," Adams replied matter-of-factly. "By making it impossible for them to continue their attacks. By winning." Dr. Helen Cross, the mission's xenobiologist, tried to explain the human perspective. "You have to understand, our species evolved differently than yours. We're apex predators. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. Our entire civilization is built on the concept of survival through superior violence." The Federation representatives were horrified. "But surely," Vorthak protested, "there must be rules to warfare. Limits on what is acceptable, standards of conduct that separate civilized beings from animals." Major Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Zarathi aren't following your rules. They're committing genocide. You can't stop genocide with good manners and defensive tactics." The briefing continued for hours. The Federation officers showed detailed analysis of Zarathi weapons, ship designs, and battle formations. They had studied their enemy extensively, but seemed unable to develop effective countermeasures. Sergeant Murphy studied the tactical displays with growing impatience. "You're thinking about this all wrong," he finally said. "You're trying to figure out how to defend against them. That's not how you win wars." "Then how do you win wars?" asked a delegate from the insect-like klaxon species. "You attack," Murphy replied simply. "You find out where they live, where they keep their supplies, where their commanders sleep. Then you go there and kill them before they can kill you." The aliens were shocked by his directness. "But that would mean taking offensive action," Vorthak protested. "Invading their territory, targeting non-combatants." Colonel Ross leaned forward. "General, how many of your people have the Zarathi killed?" "Billions," Vorthak admitted quietly. "And how many Zarathi have you killed?" The alien general looked ashamed. "Perhaps thousands. We try to minimize casualties on both sides." Ross nodded grimly. "That's why you're losing." War isn't about minimizing casualties, it's about maximizing the enemy's casualties while minimizing your own. It's about making the cost of fighting you so high that they stop fighting. The meeting ended with no agreement on tactics. The Federation wanted the humans to integrate into their existing command structure and follow their rules of engagement. The humans wanted complete operational freedom to conduct the war as they saw fit. That night, Adams met privately with his senior officers in their temporary quarters. The rooms were luxurious by military standards, with soft beds and recreational facilities. It felt wrong to be comfortable while people were dying. "What's your assessment?" Adams asked his team. "They're not soldiers," Blake replied. "They're bureaucrats playing at war. They've got good equipment but no idea how to use it effectively." "The Zarathi are winning because they're the only ones actually fighting," Murphy added. "Everyone else is just trying not to lose too badly." Dr. Cross looked thoughtful. "I think they genuinely can't understand our approach to warfare. Violence goes against their fundamental nature. They asked for our help, but they don't really want us to be ourselves." Adams made his decision. "Then we'll have to show them what human warfare looks like. Request permission to conduct a reconnaissance mission to the Kepler 442 system. Tell them we want to observe Zarathi tactics firsthand." Colonel Ross smiled grimly. "And what are we really going to do?" "We're going to give the Zarathi their first taste of human military doctrine," Adams replied. "Maybe when the Federation sees what we can accomplish, they'll understand why we do things differently." The war was about to change in ways the peaceful Federation could never have imagined. The Kepler 442 system looked peaceful from a distance. 3 planets orbited a yellow star, and one of them had once been home to 12 million beings. Now it was a graveyard. The Zarathi had built their forward base on the corpse of that world. Major Tony Blake sat in the cockpit of his modified fighter, watching the enemy base through his targeting system. Behind him, 11 other human pilots waited for orders. They had told the Federation this was a reconnaissance mission. That was not entirely true. "All units, this is Hawk Leader," Blake spoke into his radio. "Target analysis complete. I count 43 defensive platforms, 6 command structures, and approximately 200 enemy fighters on the ground." In the command ship, Admiral Kane listened to the report with satisfaction. The Federation had been observing this base for months, gathering intelligence but never acting on it. They were about to learn the difference between observation and action. "Hawk Leader, you are cleared for Phase 1, Kane replied. "Show them what Earth sends when someone asks for help." Blake smiled inside his helmet. "Roger that, Control. All units, commence attack run." The human fighters dove toward the planet like hunting hawks. They moved in formations that the Federation had never seen before, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. Their weapons were not set to minimum power like Federation ships. They were set to kill. The first Zarathi defensive platform exploded in a ball of fire before its operators knew they were under attack. The second platform managed to return fire, but human pilots were used to dodging missiles. They had been doing it in combat for decades. On the Federation command ship, General Vorthak watched the attack in horror. "They're not conducting reconnaissance," he said to Commander Adams. "They're attacking without authorization." Adams watched the tactical display with professional interest. "They're following human military doctrine. When you find the enemy, you destroy the enemy. You don't ask permission first." The Zarathi base erupted in chaos. Alarms wailed as defensive systems came online, but the humans had already destroyed the most important targets. Communication arrays went dead. Command bunkers disappeared in clouds of flame. Supply depots exploded in chain reactions that shook the ground for miles. Sergeant Danny Murphy watched the air attack from his transport ship, waiting for his turn. Around him, 30 human soldiers checked their weapons and equipment. They were not wearing the bright uniforms of Federation forces. They were dressed in dark combat gear designed to hide them from enemy sensors. "Ground teams, prepare for insertion," came the order from Admiral Kane. "The flyboys have done their job. Now it's our turn." The transport ships dropped through the planet's atmosphere like falling stones. Zarathi fighters tried to intercept them, but most of the enemy aircraft had been destroyed on the ground. The few that managed to take off were quickly shot down by human pilots who treated air combat like a deadly dance they had been practicing their entire lives. Murphy's transport landed behind a ridge 2 miles from the main Zorathi complex. As soon as the doors opened, his team poured out and began moving toward their target. They moved like shadows, using terrain and cover in ways that Federation soldiers never learned. The Zorathi were reptilian creatures, larger and stronger than humans. Their scales could deflect energy weapons and their claws could tear through metal, but they had never fought humans before, and they were not prepared for human tactics. The first Zorathi patrol died without knowing what hit them. Murphy's team used silenced weapons and hand-to-hand combat techniques that were older than space travel. They killed quickly and quietly, leaving no survivors to warn others. Captain Susan Davis led a second team toward the communications center. Her soldiers moved through the abandoned streets of the dead city, past buildings that had once housed families and children. The Zorathi had turned this world into their military base without caring about the lives they had destroyed. "Remember what they did here," Davis told her team over their radio. "These things don't take prisoners, they don't show mercy. They kill everything that lives." The communications center was heavily defended, but the defenders were looking outward for enemy attacks. They were not expecting humans to crawl through ventilation systems and emerge inside their fortifications. Davis and her team appeared among the Zorathi like ghosts, firing weapons that had been designed to kill efficiently. The battle was brief and one-sided. Zorathi soldiers were tough and dangerous, but they had been trained to fight Federation, forces that attacked in predictable formations. Humans attacked from everywhere at once using explosives and close-range weapons that turned the confined spaces of the communications center into a killing field. Meanwhile, Colonel Betty Ross led her team against the main command bunker. The Zorathi had built it deep underground, thinking it would be safe from orbital bombardment. They had not considered that humans might simply walk up to the entrance and blow it open with shaped charges. The explosion that opened the bunker could be felt for miles. Ross and her soldiers poured into the breach, fighting their way through corridors filled with smoke and debris. They encountered desperate resistance from Zorathi officers who finally understood they were facing a different kind of enemy. In the Federation command ship, the alien officers watched in stunned silence as human forces systematically destroyed the entire Zorathi base. The tactical displays showed red icons disappearing one by one as human teams eliminated defensive positions, supply depots, and command centers. "This is not how warfare is conducted," whispered Ambassador Keithvar. "There are supposed to be rules, protocols, attempts at negotiation." Dr. Helen Cross, who had been monitoring the battle, turned to face the alien representatives. "You asked us to help you stop the Zorathi. This is how humans stop enemies who commit genocide. We don't negotiate with them, we destroy them." The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Zorathi forward base had ceased to exist. Every building had been destroyed. Every piece of equipment had been sabotaged. Every enemy soldier was dead. The humans had taken no prisoners because they had not been ordered to take prisoners. Major Blake's fighters conducted one final sweep of the area, making sure no Zorathi had escaped. They found 3 enemy ships trying to flee the system and destroyed them without hesitation. In human military doctrine, enemies who escaped could regroup and attack again later. Murphy's ground team planted explosive charges throughout the ruined base, ensuring that nothing useful would remain for other Zorathi forces. When the charges detonated, the explosions could be seen from orbit. The message was clear and simple. This is what happens to enemies of humanity. Admiral Kane addressed the Federation command staff as the human forces returned to their ships. "The Kepler 442 system is now secure. Zorathi forces have been eliminated. The base has been destroyed. This system can be resettled by Federation civilians whenever you're ready." General Vorthak stared at the tactical display showing the destroyed base. "How many Zorathi did you kill?" "All of them," Kane replied matter-of-factly. That was the point. The alien officers were horrified by the efficiency of human warfare, but they could not argue with the results. In 4 hours, humans had accomplished What Federation forces had failed to do in months of careful planning and limited engagement. "We need to discuss new rules of engagement," Vorthak said weakly. Commander Adams shook his head. "There's only one rule that matters in this war, General. Kill the enemy before they kill you. Everything else is just conversation." The Federation was beginning to understand what they had unleashed when they asked Earth for help. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Kepler 442 base, and the war had changed completely. The Zorathi Empire, which had seemed unstoppable before, was now retreating on all fronts. Human forces had struck at targets throughout their territory, destroying military installations and supply lines with surgical precision. Lieutenant Colonel Ray Cooper stood in the ruins of what had once been the primary Zorathi biological weapons facility. The complex had been built deep inside an asteroid, hidden from Federation sensors for years. The Zorathi had used this place to create the weapons that turned living beings into dust. Now it was gone. Cooper's team had infiltrated the facility, using methods that Federation forces considered impossible. They had crawled through maintenance shafts, disabled security systems, and eliminated guards without raising any alarms. When they reached the main laboratory, they had planted nuclear charges salvaged from human ship engines. The explosion had been visible from 3 star systems away. "Sir, we've confirmed destruction of all research data," reported Staff Sergeant Carol White, who was checking the twisted remains of computer systems. "Nothing survived. They can't rebuild this." Cooper nodded with satisfaction. The Federation had wanted to capture the facility intact, to study the weapons, and develop defenses against them. Cooper had different orders. Some weapons were too dangerous to exist, even in the hands of allies. "Pack it up," he told his team. "We've got another target in the Vega system." Across the galaxy, the final battle of the war was beginning. Captain Neil Jackson coordinated the orbital bombardment of Zorathi Prime, the enemy homeworld. Human warships hung in space above the planet like birds of prey, their weapons trained on military targets below. The bombardment was precise and devastating. Government buildings disappeared in flashes of light. Military bases became craters. Communication networks went silent. The Zorathi leadership, which had ordered the genocide of billions, now faced the same fate they had inflicted on others. On the planet's surface, Master Sergeant Carol White led human ground forces through the capital city. The streets were empty except for Zorathi soldiers who had been cut off from their commanders. These enemies fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but desperation was not enough against human tactical superiority. White's team moved through the urban landscape like hunters tracking wounded prey. They used the city's own infrastructure against its defenders, turning sewers into approach routes and rooftops into sniper positions. Every building became a fortress, every street a killing field. The Zorathi had never faced enemies who understood urban warfare. Their tactics were designed for open battles between fleets in space. They had no experience fighting against soldiers who could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before retaliation was possible. "Building secured," White reported as her team cleared another government complex. "No survivors, no intelligence recovered. Moving to next target." The systematic destruction of Zorathi command structure continued for days. Human forces worked their way through the capital city, eliminating every center of military and political power. They took no prisoners because their orders were clear: end the war completely. Admiral Kane watched the operation from her flagship, monitoring reports from ground teams and orbital units. The Federation representatives on her bridge were silent, overwhelmed by the efficiency of human warfare. In less than a week, humans had crippled an empire that had threatened the entire galaxy. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zorathi High Command," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Karen White. "They're requesting a ceasefire." Kane turned to General Vorthak, who had been observing the final battle with growing unease. "What does Federation protocol say about ceasefire requests?" "We should open negotiations immediately," Vorthak replied. "Establish terms for surrender, arrange prisoner exchanges, begin peace talks." Kane shook her head. "That's not how humans end wars with genocidal enemies. Lieutenant, open a channel to all Zorathi forces. The main screen showed Admiral Kane's face as her message was broadcast across the dying empire. Her expression was hard as stone, her voice cold as space itself. "This is Admiral Lisa Kane of the Earth Defense Force," she announced. "To all Zorathi military and political leaders, your war is over. Your fleets are destroyed. Your homeworld is occupied. Your biological weapons facilities have been eliminated. You have one choice: unconditional surrender or complete annihilation." The response came within hours. The surviving Zorathi leadership, trapped in underground bunkers with human forces closing in around them, transmitted their formal surrender. The message was brief and simple. They gave up all claims to conquered territories, agreed to Federation oversight of their remaining population, and accepted responsibility for their crimes against sapient life. The war was over. 3 days later, Admiral Kane stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Federation Council. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from dozens of worlds, many of which had been saved from Zorathi genocide by human intervention. Ambassador Kethvar approached the podium carrying a crystal medallion that glowed with soft blue light. "Admiral Kane," he said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Federation and the billions of beings whose lives you have saved, I present you with the Star of Valor, our highest military honor." Kane accepted the award, but her expression remained serious. "The Federation asked Earth for help and we provided it, but I want everyone here to understand what that help cost." She activated a holographic display showing casualty reports from the war. The numbers were staggering. Millions of Zorathi soldiers dead, their entire military infrastructure destroyed, their government eliminated, their ability to wage war permanently ended. "This is what human warfare looks like," Kane continued. "We don't fight limited engagements or symbolic battles. When we go to war, we go to win completely. We destroy our enemies so thoroughly that they can never threaten innocent people again." The hall was silent. The Federation representatives understood that they had witnessed something both necessary and terrible. Human military efficiency had saved them, but it had also shown them a side of warfare they had never imagined. Commander Adams stepped forward to address the assembly. "The Federation is now safe from the Zorathi threat, but there will be other threats in the future, other enemies who see your peaceful nature as weakness. When that happens, you know where to find us." Dr. Helen Cross, who had spent months studying the psychological impact of the war on both humans and aliens, offered her analysis. "The Federation evolved on worlds where cooperation was the key to survival. Humans evolved on a world where conflict was constant. Both paths led to intelligent life, but they created very different approaches to solving problems." She paused, looking around the Great Hall at the assembled delegates. "You asked us to bear the moral burden of necessary violence so that peaceful civilizations could survive. We accepted that burden because we understand that some threats can only be stopped through superior force." The ceremony concluded with the formal invitation for Earth to join the Galactic Federation as a full member. The role offered to humanity was unique. They would serve as the Federation's military protectors, the guardians who would face threats too dangerous for peaceful species to handle. Admiral Kane accepted the offer on behalf of Earth. "We understand the responsibility you're giving us," she said. "We will not abuse it, but we will not hesitate to use it when necessary. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and someone has to be willing to fight the monsters that live in the dark." As the human forces prepared to return to Earth, they carried with them the gratitude of entire civilizations and the knowledge that they had done something that peaceful beings could not do themselves. They had become killers so that others could remain innocent. The Federation had asked for help, and Earth had sent exactly what the situation required. Not diplomats or peacekeepers, but warriors who understood that some problems could only be solved through the application of overwhelming force. The galaxy was safer now, protected by humans who had chosen to carry the burden of necessary violence so that others would not have to.